the Malaysia launch of the 2021 report of the Lancet Countdown.
Okay, come. Yang Berhormat Dato Seri Dr. Noraini Ahmad, Minister of Higher Education Malaysia, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri Insinyur Dr. Zaini bin Ujang, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Water Malaysia, Professor Dr. Mazlan Abdul Ghaffar, Vice Chancellor of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu, Professor Dr. Elizabeth Robinson, the Director of the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment, United Kingdom, Mr. Mark Stevenson, author and advisor to the UK's Ministry of Defence on Peace, Security and Climate Change, distinguished and honourable guests, scientists and researchers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to everyone. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to the Malaysia launch of the 2021 report of the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change. My name is Su Xiong Lam. I'm a professor of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu, and together with my fellow faculty, Associate Professors Dr. Maisam Tabatabai, we will be your moderators for this event. On behalf of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu, we would like to express our gratitude to the Lancet Countdown for co-branding this prestigious yet exciting event with UMT. This event reflects UMT's dedications to global sustainable development in the face of the major health challenges brought about by the climate change. Before we continue, let's have a dua recitation to give blessing to us and this event, followed by presenting UMT's corporate video.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good day. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala sayidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Allahumma lakal hamdu kama hadaitana Allahumma lakal hamdu kama hadaitana lil Islam wa 'allamtana al hikmata wal Qur'an. Allahumma inna nas'aluka minal khairi kullihi ajilihi wa ajilihi ma 'allimna minhu wa ma lam na'lam wa na'udzu bika minasy syarri kullihi ajilihi wa ajilihi ma 'allimna minhu wa ma lam na'lam. All praise to you, ya Allah, the Almighty, most great and most merciful. To you who creates the earth and the heaven and all that lies within. All praise to Allah for what He bestowed us from the bounty of Islam and taught us wisdom and guidance from Quran. Ya Allah, may we ask you to give us good and to protect us from the sin. Ya Allah, we gathered here today for the Malaysia launch of 2021 report of the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change. With your grace and blessing, this program shall run as planned. Through this humble supplication, we express our gratitude for this opportunity, and we seek from you, Ya Allah, endless guidance and blessing in our present and future. Ya Allah, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, guide us in mercy and knowledge. Therefore, forgive us for our wrongdoings and grant us good in this life and hereafter. Allahumma ja'al jam'ana hadha jam'an marhuma wa tafarruqana min ba'dihi tafarruqan ma'suma wa la taj'alillahumma fina wa la ma'ana shaqiyan wa la mahruma birahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adzaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala sayidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Maysam Tabatabai, and I'm a co-author of the Lancet Countdown 2021 report. Climate change is undermining progress made in global health, affecting people in every corner and exacerbating inequities. More frequent and intensifying heat waves and extreme weather events like floods and drought together with the delay in adaptation, are altering the spread of infectious disease, putting our food and water security at risk, directly impacting on our physical and mental health, and exacerbating poverty. With trillions of dollars being made available for COVID-19 recovery, this rapid economic reactivation presents an unprecedented opportunity for the world to move towards the WHO's prescription for a healthy and green recovery. In doing so, the world could meet the Paris Agreement goals, protect the natural system that support well-being, and minimize inequities through reduced health effects and maximize health co-benefits of a universal low-carbon transition. The time to act is now. And before I proceed, I was just told by my colleagues here that the former director, WHO Director for Child and Maternal Health, Professor Anthony Costello, who is the co-chair of the Lancet Countdown, is also with us today. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us. We appreciate it. We know you're very busy. It means a lot that you are joining Malaysia Launch.
Thank you.
The Lancet Countdown, tracking progress on health and climate change, exists to monitor this transition from threat to opportunity. We are a collaboration of over 120 leading experts from 43 academic institutions and United Nations agencies across the globe, bringing together climate scientists, engineers, energy specialists, economists, political scientists, public health professionals, and doctors. Each year, our findings are published annually in medical journal The Lancet, ahead of the UN climate change negotiations. Our data makes clear how climate change is affecting our health, the consequences of delayed action, and the health benefits of a robust response.
Ladies and gentlemen, UMT is honored and privileged to have passionate, high-profile speakers in this event. We would also like to thank all the audience in the hall and also those who are now with us online from all around the world. We just got an update that a total of 1,000 participants have registered for this event, of which many of them are now with us in the hall and virtually. Many thanks to all of you for supporting this initiative.
And we would like to ask you to please turn your cameras on for us so we can have your lovely faces on the screen here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my son. Without further ado, please allow me to welcome the Vice-Chancellor of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu, Professor Dr. Mazlan Ghaffar, to give the welcoming speech. Please welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berhormat Datuk Seri Dr. Noraini Ahmad, Minister of Higher Education Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Datuk Seri IR Dr. Zaini Ujang, Secretary General, Ministry of Environment and Water Malaysia. Professor Dr. Elizabeth Robinson, Director, Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment, United Kingdom. Mr. Mark Stevenson, author and advisor to the UK Ministry of Defence on Peace, Security and Climate Change. Distinguished and esteemed guests, scientists and researchers, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome all of you to today's events, especially to our guests of honor, Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Dr. Noraini Ahmad, Minister of Higher Education Malaysia, and Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri IR Dr. Zaini bin Ujang, Secretary General, Ministry of Environment and Water Malaysia. On behalf of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu, I would like to extend our sincere appreciation to Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Dr. Noraini Ahmad for joining us to officiate the event. I also like to welcome our honorable speakers of this event, Professor Dr. Elizabeth Robinson, Director of the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment at the London School of Economics and Political Science, United Kingdom, and Mr. Mark Stevenson, a celebrated author and advisor to the UK's Ministry of Defence on peace, security, and climate change. With a focus on launch of the 2021 reports of the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change, I hope that throughout this event, you will consider how we should manage the challenges as we all face concerning the increasing impact of climate change on public health, and how we can ensure that the recommendations and practical solutions put forth by experts should be executed systematically to benefit the current and future generations. The Lancet Countdown is an international collaboration of 120 world-leading experts and authors from 43 academic institutions and United Nations agencies in its 2021 report have shared a significant finding with the world. The key messages are to be broadly disseminated with the hope for an immediate response by the global community. And here are the key messages. 2020 Lancet Countdown gives a code red for health. The health impact of climate change are worsening across every indicator track affecting all corners of the world. Just as the world is failing to deliver an equitable response to COVID, there are deep inequities in the global response to climate change. COVID-19 recovery gives an unprecedented opportunity for a better future. This will only be possible if world leaders commit to urgent action and act together to ensure no person is left behind. Fully appreciating the magnitude of the challenge and the significance of these key messages and findings, UMT has partnered with the Lancet Countdown in organizing the Malaysia launch of the Countdown 2021 report as part of its dedication to global sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, UMT sees this event as a platform to devise plans based on the accumulated knowledge generated by international collaboration such as the Lancet Countdown. Plan whose effective implementation will be needed to integrate climate change mitigation into COVID-19 recovery plans to address global inequities in health and build a sustainable future. I firmly believe that we all should make the best out of this event and initiate nationwide collaborative projects to speed up the country's transformation toward a net zero carbon, zero discharge nation, and hopefully serving as a role model in the region. On that note, I thank all the audience in the hall and those who are with us virtually, and wish you every success in collaborating towards building a more promising and vibrant future for every and each members of the global population. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much to Prof. Mazlan for giving the welcoming speech and also share the key messages from the Lancet Countdown 2021 report. Next, we are honored to have Yang Berhormat Dato Sri Dr. Noraini Ahmad, the Minister of Higher Education Malaysia, to give the inaugural speech and later to officiate this event. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to Datuk Sri Dr. Noraini Ahmad.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good afternoon. Yang berbahagia Datuk Seri Insinyur Dr. Zaini Ujang, Secretary General Ministry of Environment and Water Malaysia, Professor Dr. Mazlan Abdul Ghaffar, Vice Chancellor of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu, Professor Dr. Elizabeth Robinson, Director, Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and Environment, United Kingdom, Mr. Mark Stevenson, author and advisor to the UK's Ministry of Defence on Peace, Security and Climate Change, honourable guests, scientists and researchers, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate Universiti Malaysia Terengganu for being selected for the second time as the organizer of the Malaysia launch of the 2021 report of the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change. I would like to also thank UMT for inviting me to officiate the launch of this prestigious event. It is an honor for me to speak in the presence of such a diverse audience of distinguished experts, public sector officials, lecturers, researchers, students, and members of the press. Ladies and gentlemen, a key to a resilient society is quality education, which is the fourth United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Providing quality education has always been the focus of Malaysia's higher education institutions. Our HEIs, alongside the Ministry of Higher Education, acknowledge that the role of education transcends the fourth UN SDG. It can also contribute to achieving all other SDGs. Academics at HEIs conduct research, transfer new knowledge, skills, as well as technologies to students, communities, and industries. Together, the HEI's community acts as a change agent that plays a significant role in implementing global sustainable development strategies. With collective efforts, it is hoped that all the UN SDGs can be achieved by 2030. On the 27th of September 2021, Malaysia launched the 12th Malaysian Plan in support of Malaysia's shared Prosperity Vision 2030, which positions sustainable development as an issue of high priority. Therefore, I'm pleased that the 2021 report of the Lancet Countdown is on climate change, which is highly relevant to sustainable development. I hope this will bring awareness that will lead to more impactful actions to address these issues in the near future. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change can pose serious threats to public health, which further deepening inequalities globally, particularly in communities exposed to food and water insecurity, heat waves, and the spread of infectious disease. Realizing this, Malaysia is committed to achieving the 13th SDG on climate action. Malaysia strives to reduce greenhouse gases emissions and prevent deaths due to natural disasters. However, it is important to understand that taking necessary actions is a shared responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, universities can support the 12th Malaysia Plan, Lancet, and the UN by conducting research and developing education programs in areas such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, solid waste management, air pollution, and forest conservation. On that note, I would like to acknowledge and thank UMT for actively advocating MOHI's initiatives. This includes the successful accreditation of the Institute of Tropical Aquaculture and Fisheries as the Higher Institution Center for Excellence for Future Food to tackle climate change and support the national food security policy. In addition, I'm pleased to inform you that UMT has its own climate change adaptation lab, known as CCA Lab, and it is highly equipped lab with cutting-edge technology at the Institute of Marine Biotechnology, UMT. The lab was founded and has been led by UMT's Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Mazlan Ghaffar, who is the recipient of long-term research grant awarded by MOHI with an accumulated total of ringgit Malaysia 3.56 million. With the establishment of the CCA Lab, UMT is ready to lead research on Malaysia's aquatic species and climate adaptation, as well as promote the development of scientific outcomes and databases for the benefit of the people and the country. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ministry is keen on working closely with the Cabinet Committee on the National Food Security Policy chaired by the Prime Minister to strengthen national food security. In fact, we participated actively in developing the 2.0 National Agro-Food Policy for 2021 until 2030. We have also been contributing actively in building and implementing the National Roadmap of Water Sector Transformation 2040. And I hope that HEIs in Malaysia can also collaborate with each other and other government agencies such as the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Industries and the Ministry of Environment and Water to ensure climate change mitigation and COVID-19 recovery plans will be effectively integrated to build a sustainable future. I truly admire the effort made by the Lancet Countdown team in providing intellectual discourse and promoting greater awareness on health, climate change, and food security to the global community. I also appreciate the willingness of the experts to share their knowledge and experiences with all of us. I'm sure that all participants, stakeholders, and the communities involved will have a fruitful and rewarding experience from this event. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I hereby officiate the Malaysia launch of the Lancet Countdown 2021 report. Thank you very much.
The climate crisis is a code red for a healthy future. 120 world-leading experts, 43 academic institutions and UN agencies, 44 indicators for the 2021 report of the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change. Join us online at 3 p.m. until 5 p.m. Malaysia time, or from 7 a.m. until 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, on the 22nd of November 2021. The Malaysia launch of the Lancet Countdown 2021 report on health and climate change. The health impacts of climate change are worsening across every indicator tracked, affecting people in all corners of the world. Climate change is exacerbating the hazards already faced by many, particularly in communities vulnerable to food and water insecurity, heat waves, and the spread of infectious diseases, and acting to increase health inequities around the world. Urgent action is needed to integrate climate change mitigation into COVID-19 recovery plans, to address global inequities in health and build a sustainable future. Coinciding with the 26th UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, we emphasize that current COVID-19 recovery plans threaten to lock the world into a future of increased emissions and ill health.
Malaysia mengiktiraf kepentingan pemulihan pasca pandemik melalui pemulihan hijau.
However, COVID-19 recovery also presents an unprecedented opportunity for a better future. We could enjoy economic and environmental sustainability, better health and reduced inequities. This will only be possible if world leaders commit to urgent action and act together to ensure no person is left behind. This event will contextualize the findings of the 2021 Lancet Countdown Report in a Malaysian context, bringing together leading academics and policymakers with wide-ranging experience and expertise.
Thank you very much to Yang Berhormat Datuk Seri Dr. Noraini Ahmad for officiating the launching of this prestigious event. And we hope that you enjoy the montage.
Thank you so much all for staying with us. I would like to grab this opportunity since Professor Dr. Anthony Costello, the co-chair of the Lancet Countdown, is here with us today. That's a surprise visit, by the way. And Anthony was the former director of WHO Child and Maternal Health. He has dedicated his life to improving child and maternal health. And over the last almost a decade, he has been so much involved in research on climate change and health. So Anthony, I'm sure everybody like me would love to hear a few words from you, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Anthony.
Assalamualaikum.
Oh.
Myself, thank you so much for your warm words, and thank you for a wonderfully professional launch of the report, and especially to the Minister for her inspiring words and her political commitment to this issue, and of course to all the coming speakers, and a special thanks to my dear friend, to the Minister who has amazing energy and commitment, and a special thanks to my dear friend, to the coming speakers who has amazing energy and especially to the Minister who has had amazing energy and speakers, and a special thanks to my dear friend, to the coming speakers who has and especially thanks to my dear friend, to the Minister I have magnificent energy and the COVID, and especially I have magnificent. You've come so far. Your part of the world have done a lot better than in Europe. Look, climate change unites us all. We face an enormous and formidable problem. COP26 did make some progress, but we still have a very long way to go. Our children's future depends absolutely upon the actions that we take today. I think we still can keep warming below 1.5 degrees just, but it will take huge political courage, global solidarity, and a determination of all of us to commit to a carbon-free, carbon-zero future. Thank you so much for this work. I'm not going to hold you up. I hope to stay another few minutes before I have to go to work, but it's been a great privilege to listen to the meeting so far. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It was a great honor to have you. And thank you for supporting the Malaysia launch of the Lancet Countdown 2021 report.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. And I hope you keep your cameras on. We would love to see your beautiful, pretty faces on the screen here. Please allow me to introduce our next speaker. Professor Elizabeth Robinson is the director of the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment at the London School of Economics and Political Science, United Kingdom. Elizabeth is a renowned environmental economist with over 25 years of experience undertaking research in lower-income countries. Her research addresses the design of policies and institutions to reduce climate change emission, protect the environment, improve the livelihoods of resource-dependent communities, and enhance agricultural systems. Her recent focus includes climate change and systematic risk, and tracking the co-benefits of climate change mitigation and health, oriented particularly around food security and food system. Before joining the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment, Elizabeth has variously worked at the University of Reading, where she was a full professor, the Boston Consulting Group, the World Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, Natural Resource Institute, and as a tutorial fellow in economics at the University of Oxford. Elizabeth has successfully coordinated many exciting projects, but more importantly for today, she has been leading the Working Group 1 of the Lancet Countdown, focused on climate change impacts, exposure, and vulnerability. She has been frequently quoted in leading newspapers such as The Guardian and the Financial Times, and has appeared on various TV channels, including Al Jazeera Inside the Story, the BBC News at 10, and BBC World News. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Professor Dr. Elizabeth Robinson to deliver her keynote speech on the major findings of the Lancet Countdown 2021 report. Thank you so much for joining us, Elizabeth, and the stage is yours.
Please welcome.
Thank you so much, Maysam, for that very generous introduction. Maysam and I have been co-authors now for several years on the Lancet Countdown, and it's a delight to work with him. I would just say, so many honourable guests here, to the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mazlan Ghaffar, the Honourable Minister of Higher Education in Malaysia, Dr. Noraini Ahmad, all the honourable guests. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I hope I get this right now when I share my screen. Thank you so much. As we've heard, this Lancet Countdown report is very much a code red for humanity, for a healthy future. Published in the Lancet Journal. The Lancet's the oldest medical journal in English, and arguably the most influential journal in the world. And it's been working to try to understand the links between climate change and health for almost 3 decades. And back in 2015, the Lancet Commission concluded that anthropogenic climate change threatens to undermine the past 50 years of gains in public health. And I don't think the opinion has changed in the last 6 years. But the flip side of that, as we've heard, is that tackling climate change could be the greatest health opportunity for the 20th century. And so that's a much more positive message we try to hold on to during these really difficult. Every year since 2015, the Lancet has published the Lancet Countdown annual report. We're funded by the Wellcome Trust, which tracks the world as it's moving from climate change as a threat to human health, we hope, to a response to climate change as an opportunity for human health. I think we try to stay optimistic in these difficult times. And we've heard about the many collaborators across the world, 43 leading academic and UN institutions, over 120 academics collaborating on this work. And here is the group of partners around the world. The 2021 report, this is our 5th iteration of indicators. Of course, it coincides with COP26 that was hosted, I'm here in the UK, where countries have really faced that pressure to try to realize the ambitions of the Paris Agreement. And we present 44 indicators across 5 domains. And what's new this year, and I do encourage you to, we have the report, but that's quite long and dry. What I really encourage you to do is look at the website, lancetcountdown.org, where you can actually see the data. You can go onto the data platform and play around with the data, look at data for individual countries. So yes, I encourage you to do that. There are 3 new indicators. One is heat and physical activity. and a recognition that as the heat builds up around the globe, the opportunities to be outside and get that physical exercise that we know improve our health is falling. Another one is heat and sentiment. And then we're also looking at production-based and consumption-based attribution of carbon dioxide and PM 2.5 emissions. Something else that we've done that's new this year is we've disaggregated our indicators by UNDP's Human Development Index. And this has sort of exposed some of the deep inequalities when it comes to climate change. And I think all of us know that, you know, the reason we're in the mess we are at the moment is due to higher income countries. And often it's the lower income countries and those with low HDI that are going to suffer most. Now, of course, Malaysia is a high HDI country. And so it's worth thinking about that when we look at the disaggregated data. And every year, we're not just reporting the same indicators. We're working hard, all those scientists, the 93 authors, we're working hard to ensure that our methodological approaches are up to date, the best they are. We're improving where they can. As data sources come on board, we're adding those. So each year we're improving our existing indicators, and we're looking to see where there's opportunity to bring in new indicators. We're also trying to have global coverage. It's difficult sometimes, but we're trying our best to have global coverage of data where the data exists. So what we know, as we've heard, is the health impacts of climate change are worsening across all indicators tracked, affecting all people across the globe. And climate change is exacerbating those hazards that are already faced by many people, particularly those most vulnerable. And I think what we found is that, you know, the response to COVID has not been equal across the world. And our fear and our concern is that the global response to climate change also isn't equal. And I think we would have, those of us who are following COP26 will have really felt that. Discussions of mitigation and responsibility for that, discussions of, you know, how lower income countries can build resilience, discussions of loss and damage. All these are some of those issues about the unequal links between climate change and health, and the fact it's higher income countries that have often caused a lot of the problems. If we rapidly decarbonize across the world, there's going to be better health across the planet. But what we know is it's much harder for lower income countries to find these transition pathways to low carbon but high prosperity and low poverty without support from higher income countries in terms of financing. So to the countdown for this year, there are 5 working groups in the Lancet countdown. Maysam and myself are co-authors in Working Group 1, and I coordinate Working Group 1. And these are the 5 working groups, and I'm just going to give you a sense of some of the indicators of each of the working groups in the next sort of 10-15 minutes. So Working Group 1 looks at climate change impacts, exposures and vulnerabilities. And this is quite a complicated diagram to put up, but what we're interested in Working Group 1 is how climate change impacts indicators such as carbon dioxide, temperature, seasonal changes, sea level rise, how that affects health, which we can see at the bottom of the slide, through these various complex pathways. And I'm just going to highlight a few of the indicators that we tracked for you just now. So one of the indicators I wanted to highlight is wildfires, because I think one thing we're all increasingly aware of is the increasing prevalence of wildfires and the health risk that wildfires bring with them. And so we know that there's a direct cost of wildfires in terms of the tragedy of lost lives, but there's also quite a lot of other losses that we don't necessarily think about. For example, people who are downwind of wildfires, there's increased particulate pollution getting deep into those lungs and causing health problems. But even people who can't go outside and exercise because the air is polluted from the wildfires. We're also starting to learn that actually there's a lot of mental well-being and mental health issues linked to wildfires. Just the stress and the PTSD of seeing animals, your livestock dying in a wildfire, or seeing your house lost, or seeing your friends harmed, or knowing people lost their lives. So there's quite a lot of recognition now that wildfires have a direct negative impact on our health, but also an indirect impact. And what we're seeing is that nearly 60% of countries that we track had an increase in the number of days people were exposed to high or very extremely high fire danger in 2017 to 20, compared with a baseline of 2001 to 2004. And 72% of countries had increased human exposure to wildfires across the same period. And so this is, again, this is just very worrying. As Anthony sort of mentioned, and as the video mentioned that we saw, the health impacts are getting worse, and this is worrying. We also track the climate suitability for infectious diseases, and we track the climate suitability for many diseases. And so I'm just highlighting dengue here, but we track Vibrio cholera, we track malaria. And again, what we're seeing is that there are changes in climate suitability for the transmission of dengue. And on this diagram, it's a lot to take in again, but basically on the left-hand side graph, anything in red means things are getting worse, and anything in blue means things are getting better. So in terms of climate suitability for dengue transition, in most of the countries, the situation is getting worse. In a small number, it's better. And we can see that the situation is getting worse for Malaysia. We also consider vulnerability. So on the one hand, we look at exposures. So to what extent the climatic conditions are more suitable for the transmission of different diseases. But we also look at vulnerability, which is affected by physiological, social, financial, geographic factors, those human factors, and our capacity to adapt. And what we have found globally is that these improvements in public health have seen a global reduction in vulnerability, despite an increase in climate suitability. And I think one of the key messages here is that climate change is just making it harder. So at the moment, with respect to dengue and a lot of other of these health situations, climate change is making things harder, but we're doing better. By increasing our public health, by reducing poverty, by increasing prosperity, we're actually still managing to improve our health outcomes. But it's getting harder and harder due to climate change. And the money that could be spent on other aspects of public health increasingly is being spent trying to deal with these climate-linked diseases. I just pulled out some of the data from our website, lancetcountdown.com or .org, so that you can see the kind of data you can pull out. So if you go to the data platform, you can pull out data for Southeast Asia. And what we find actually is, in terms of vectorial capacity, there's not too large a change in Southeast Asia. So that's sort of quite a positive message at the moment. If we look at terrestrial food security and undernutrition, it's hard to find a positive message here. On the one hand, yes, global food production is still increasing, but on the other hand, what we can term crop yield potential is falling across the globe in all the key crops. And what I've done again, and you can do this, which is great, is I've pulled out specific data from Malaysia, and here we're able to track rice and maize. And these data are quite worrying. A downward sloping graph suggests that things are getting worse. And what we can see here is that what this is basically telling us is, even if at the moment crop yields are increasing, even if at the moment a country is able to increase its production, in the future it's just going to get harder because the potential of our crops is falling. And this is basically because as it's getting hotter, crops are maturing much faster, and so there's not enough time for those grains to swell. And so we can see that it's particularly problematic for maize, but also crop yield potential for rice is falling. So we can think of this as a leading indicator, something we really need to be concerned about in the future. And increasing temperatures are therefore increasing the probability of food security. And for the first time, we've been able to identify that there is a link between increasing temperatures and food insecurity. And so the left-hand graph shows the global data. And what I've just pulled out from FAO stat data, quite simple to do on the right-hand side, is looking at the prevalence of food insecurity in Malaysia. Now, the great news is, Malaysia is doing really well at reducing food insecurity. So the prevalence of undernourishment is very low. But we have to be a little bit careful, and we see this in countries across the globe, a slight uptick in these other measures of food insecurity, moderate and severe food insecurity. And so that's where we sort of need to be a little bit concerned to what extent climate change is making things harder. We can't attribute it for Malaysia, but we need to think really hard about that. In our working group 2, we look at adaptation planning and resilience for health. And so these are some of the indicators that we track across the globe, the extent to which countries, cities have got adaptation planning assessments, the extent to which there's climate information services for health, the extent to which there's adaptation delivery and implementation, and the extent to which there's adaptation spending specifically for health. And I've just highlighted one of the exciting indicators that we're measuring. And so we're trying to look at city level climate change risk assessments. So how many cities have actually put in place a city level climate change risk assessment? And it's quite hard to see on this graph, but again, you can go to the data on the website and you can actually look at Malaysians particularly. And what we can find, which is rather good news actually, is there's many cities and municipalities in Malaysia where climate change risk assessments have been undertaken. So they've already been undertaken in Muar, Tawau and Seberang Perai municipal councils and Iskandar Regional Development Authority. We also find that in Kuala Lumpur, the assessment is in progress. So this is really positive because having that understanding of climate risks and being able to adapt and build resilience to them is critically important. As we see, not surprisingly, most of those cities that are responding at the moment are either belong to high or very high HDI countries, as does Malaysia. So this is a real positive for Malaysia in terms of efforts to undertake adaptation, specifically linked to health. Working Group 3 looks at mitigation actions and health co-benefits. Arguably, this is one of the core messages from the Lancet Countdown, which is there are so many activities that governments and individuals and cities and corporations that can do that are good for our health and that are good for the environment. So whether that's reducing our burning of fossil fuels and therefore improving the air quality, so that's an immediate win for the country, and globally there's a benefit in terms of climate change mitigation, and the country doubly benefits, one from the health benefits, the health co-benefits, and two, making that contribution towards climate change mitigation. So keeping the fossil fuels in the ground, cleaner household energy more broadly, and so that reduces that premature mortality from ambient air pollution, sustainable, healthy transportation. So the benefits of that, again, are in terms of less air pollution in our cities particularly, and more active transport from individuals. So if we're taking public transport, if we feel it's safe to cycle, then again, we're getting healthier by walking to the bus, by using a bicycle, and we're not contributing to emissions. We're starting to track some of those links between food, agriculture, and health. So emissions from agricultural production and consumption, and those diet and health co-benefits. So especially in higher income countries and Western countries, if we had a more balanced diet, if we had more plant-based diet, we could see our own health improving. We know that in the UK, we know that in the US, but we could also see reduced emissions from agriculture as well. And then there's efforts for mitigation in the healthcare sector. And the UK certainly is one of the countries we're really excited that is putting those efforts in. We know COVID-19 has represented challenges. It's also represented opportunities to encourage action that yields benefits to health through those links to climate change. It's not clear that we've taken advantage of those fully, which is frustrating. So I'm just highlighting again a couple of indicators from the Working Group 3. And so one is mortality from ambient air pollution. And what we find is 3.3 million deaths can be attributed to ambient PM2.5 pollution. That's those really tiny particulate pollution that, for example, comes from burning just diesel and petrol in our cars, goes deep down into our lungs, causes us dreadful health problems in the long term. A third of these come directly from fossil fuel combustion. Again, medium and high HDI groups actually have the highest mortality rates. So I pulled out the data from Malaysia, and what we find is that actually premature deaths from ambient air pollution are relatively low, but they are increasing. So what's really positive about Malaysia is there's a high use by households of clean fuels, which is directly benefiting Malaysia's population in terms of health. And this is where tracking indicators over time is so helpful, because we can start to look for these early warning systems. So where we start to see those premature deaths in Malaysia just creeping up a little bit. And then that's where we can start to dig down and say, okay, let's try to understand why. We've been following the indicator. It's not going in the direction we'd like to see. And let's try to understand why. Now, in Working Group 1, where we're looking at those impacts on heat and heat waves and extremes of weather, that's a global problem. That's what COP26 is trying to help countries coordinate to solve. But some of these, any of these indicators we look at in Working Group 3, these are areas where there can be country level actions that can have that win-win of climate change mitigation and improving health. And as countries start to ratchet down their nationally determined contributions to reduce emissions, these are looking at the links between health and emissions is a really great way to get that win-win out of these. So I just highlighted one more area, which is our food system. So it's responsible for 21 to 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions, most of which actually originate from meat and dairy livestock, but also we're seeing emissions from rice and the way rice is grown, so we get methane emissions. What we see here is that it's very clear that it's the very high HDI countries that are causing most of those emissions. And a lot of that is to do with livestock, whether it's for meat consumption or for milk consumption. But we can actually see in some of the low and medium HDI countries there, if you look at the yellow, I'm looking at the yellow there, that's the emissions from rice, and that's the methane. So that's actually quite interesting, perhaps a bit of a surprise to me, just how important that is. So in the food system, we know how we grow our crops, and we raise our livestock affects emissions, and we know the choices we make in our diet also affects our health and our emissions. So there's really interesting co-benefits there. So Working Group 5 looks at economics and finance. And here we're trying to put some economic numbers against these health impacts, these health costs. And we do that not necessarily because we feel comfortable putting a monetary value against health, but because that's the reality of what governments need. Every decision governments make is a trade-off often between our cost, the cost of something, and our health, whether that's through poverty reduction or spending on our healthcare system. And so it's important, I think, for governments to understand just how much the health costs of climate change are costing our budgets, the government budgets. And so we track some of these really interesting health and economic losses of climate change and the benefits, the economic benefits gained from climate change mitigation. And so here is just one slide I wanted to highlight. And the reason I'm highlighting this is that we can see the costs of health impacts of air pollution. And this is the economic value of years of lost life due to PM2.5 exposure in 2015 and 2019. We can see it's quite high in Southeast Asia. And so I thought that was quite interesting to highlight, that these are quite high costs in Southeast Asia. We saw that the costs in terms of human health are not quite so high in Malaysia, but in the region as a whole, this is one area where reducing that air pollution, reducing the emissions that are most air polluting, would have clear benefits on health and clear benefits on government budgets. And of course, if government budgets are, if those costs are reduced, that's more money that's available for economic development, for healthcare systems, and treating those other aspects that are not linked to health. Another indicator I just wanted to show was we look at the net value of fossil fuel subsidies and carbon prices. And again, what we find is a lot of countries have a net negative carbon price. So basically, many countries are subsidizing fossil fuels that are causing damage to health. So again, there's a win-win here. That if we take away those subsidies to fossil fuels, it's an economic benefit for the country. And of course, it's going to encourage people to use less fossil fuels. So it's a benefit to our health. And again, there's budgets that can be spent on activities that could improve health. What we find interestingly is in Malaysia, fossil fuels are subsidized, but much less so than other countries, including Australia and the UK. I found these data again looking on our wonderful data portal. And I have to say, this surprised me. I do like being surprised by the data sometimes, that the UK actually, we have quite considerable subsidies of our fossil fuels. So our final working group, and I'll just show you one slide before I conclude, is public and political engagement. And I think what we found is really important, this is a really exciting working group, is it really matters whether people are talking about those links between climate change and health. Are people noticing those links? Are governments noticing them? Are our media and our newspapers realizing that there are such strong links between health and climate change, and therefore realizing there's such tremendous benefits from mitigating climate change, reducing air pollution, healthy diets, active transport, and climate change? So there's win-wins for individual countries and the global win if we mitigate as a whole. And so we track media coverage, we track to the extent to which individuals are engaging in climate change and health. We track scientific journals. Are researchers writing about the links between climate change and health? Are journals publishing our work? And we track corporate sector engagement. 5.5, increasingly important and exciting. Are companies actually engaging with that link between climate change and health, and how can they? I'm going to highlight government engagement in climate change and health, critically important. And what we've got here is, on the left is a graph of the globally, the proportion of countries globally that have at least once in the UN general debates mentioned health, or mentioned climate change, or mentioned that intersection of health and climate change. And so by now, around actually 90% of countries are mentioning health at least once, and climate change at least once. And look how those numbers have shot up. Look at the green line, if you can see it. After 2000, climate change, which was only mentioned by around 20% of countries, in 2005, up around 75% of countries were consistently at least once mentioning climate change. And in the last few years, upwards of 75 to 90% of countries have been mentioning climate change. That intersection of climate change and health, virtually not mentioned until 2000. Then countries started to mention it. It's still under 50% of countries that are mentioning climate change and health together. But interestingly, Malaysia is one of those countries. So in UN general debates, climate has been mentioned, and climate and health have been mentioned. Let's contrast again with some other countries. The US made no mentions of climate change and health, and the UK and China, similar to Malaysia, one mention each. So Malaysia, UK, China have all mentioned climate change and health together, but over 50% of countries have not. So thank you. I'll conclude here. Just to say, the Lancet Countdown of 2021, this is a code red for health. Health impacts of climate change are worsening across the planet. We haven't done well with COVID, and we're still not doing well with climate change. The inequalities are critically important. Reducing inequalities when it comes to climate change and health is a moral imperative. It's also a practical imperative. We're not going to sort climate change if we don't deal with the inequalities. We can do, but it requires commitment from world leaders, from companies, from corporates and individuals. And I think all of us here today, we're on the right side, right? We're here, we're engaging, we know what matters and we care. So thank you so much, Maysam. Thank you, distinguished guests, for listening. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be a part of this launch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Robinson, for sharing with us the highlights of the Lancet Countdown 2021 report.
And thank you so much from me as well, Elizabeth. Our audience should know that Elizabeth is not only is a renowned scientist, but at personal level, she's the loveliest person one can wish to visit.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now would like to welcome again the Vice Chancellor of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu, Professor Dr. Mazlan Ghaffar, to deliver the introductory remarks for this event.
Thank you, moderators, Prof. Mason and Prof. Lam. Please, is a technical glitch here. Just wait a minute, yeah. just say already. Say, yeah. Just wait for a minute, yeah. Sorry. So we have some digital technical glitch here. I'm very sorry. Okay. Thank you, Prof. Lam and Prof. Mazlan. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take this opportunity to briefly introduce about Universiti Malaysia Terengganu, or more popularly known as UMT. Established since 1st of February 2027, UMT is located in Terengganu, a state in east coast of Peninsular Malaysia and on the shore of the South China Sea. Spreading out over 282 acres of land and accommodating more than 10,000 students, UMT is an eco-friendly, sustainable campus with faculty, research institutes, and student hostel all within a walking distance. We have great facilities on campus and at research station located on islands, by wetland and by the lakes, used for various research and teaching activities. Ladies and gentlemen, UMT strives to be a university of excellence, focusing on marine science, aquatics, resources, and sustainability. In the 2022 QS Asia University Ranking report, once again, UMT has been ranked among Asia top 200 universities, this time at 167. Moving up 28 places over last year's position at 195. This achievement is UMT's best thus far since its establishment. UMT is a young university with a special focus on marine sciences and food security. I have been thrilled to witness with my own eyes that the constant growth of the universities. We will continue to implement strategies that will bring UMT to the next level. UMT will continue to focus on empowering its research, teaching and internationalization, and enhancing its visibilities. This is not only for rating and ranking purposes, but also for the fulfillment of the stakeholder needs as stipulated in the university's strategic plan. This achievement serves as a proof that UMT is duly recognized by international academics as well as industry, as the QS rating involves surveys from both parties. UMT's inclusion in Asia top 200 universities will attract more international students to its campus and increase its international collaboration with world-leading academicians and industries, particularly on climate change and food security. UMT believes that there must be a balance between achieving international ranking and achieving the main goal of the university's establishment, which are creation and dissemination of the knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, the impact of climate change on food production has been disproportionate, and global warming has indeed made it possible to grow crops in higher altitude or colder regions of the world, which was not possible previously. However, it has also jeopardized crop yield in many other parts of the globe. It should be noted that although the former might seem favorable in the short run, the long-term effect is not appealing, as the overall quantity of the crop yield will be going downwards. Global warming has also led to the destruction of one of the most diverse and productive ecosystems on the planet, the coral reefs. These reefs are highly responsible for marine productivity, but increased heat has made them vulnerable, and their continued bleaching will undoubtedly pose severe threats to marine food security. UMT has been trusted by the Ministry of Higher Education to work on initiatives on climate change. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to the Ministry of Higher Education for awarding us as a long-term research grant, LRGS, for a high-impact project on the ocean climate change. This project involves comprehensive research on the potential risks and impacts of climate change on the marine and coastal ecosystem services in Malaysia, as well as on adaptation strategies, and it's very much in line with the motivation behind the Lancet countdown on the health and climate change. We are looking forward to more collaboration with researchers from the Lancet countdown on this initiative. With the support from the LRGS team, led by myself actually, UMT is also moving toward climate change adaptation activity with the establishment of the Climate Change Adaptation Laboratory, the Climate Change Adaptation Lab, located at the Institute of Marine Biotechnology. The lab has been designed to tackle climate change adaptation projects related to various economically important aquatic organisms in the coastal and marine areas such as coral, fish, and shellfish species in Malaysia. The lab is also engaged with projects concerning the Internet of Things and Fourth Industrial Revolution, Industry 4.0, and this lab is expected to be one of its kind in Malaysia, focusing only on the biotechnological adaptation of marine aquatic organisms toward climate change. Through the modeling and integrated research performed by UMT researchers, we are able to better understand the atmospheric impact on the ocean process, such as El Niño and La Nina, which are complex weather patterns resulting from variation in ocean temperatures. This in turn allows us to provide prediction of the impact on ocean productivity, storm surge, and coastal area. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change and its consequences impact, including extreme weather events and sea level rise, not only endangered large coastal population globally, but also results in the deterioration of our coastal landscapes. The latter could lead to loss of habitat and threaten food security. Global warming has already endangered the food chain in marine ecosystem, hence impacting fish development and growth. With the sinking size of fish, the bycatch is increasingly becoming a prevalent security. Further continuation of this phenomenon will undoubtedly pose serious threat to marine-based foods. As mentioned by Datuk Seri Noraini Ahmad, our Minister of Higher Education Malaysia, a significant indicator for monitoring the impact of climate change on public health is food security. Speaking on this, UMT has been actively involved in research and development on future food as part of nationwide efforts to ensure future food security of the country. A highlight of our initiatives is the strong commitment by the Institute of Tropical Aquaculture and Fisheries, Aquatrop, at UMT, which strive to produce aquaculture products as a source of future foods. Again, we would like to thank the Ministry of Higher Education for Aquatrop to be recognized as Higher Institution Center of Excellence, or we call it High COE, to develop sustainable shellfish aquaculture for future foods. Aquatrop aims to support the National Food Security Policy through development of Shellfish Research Key Laboratory, Mud Crab Hatchery and Extension Center, Marine Shrimp Breeding Center, and Green Farming Aquaculture System. I am confident that with their strong expertise and with, more importantly, deep motivation and dedication, they as a team will be able to deliver these beneficial outcomes. We are delighted to have a UMT researchers working with Lancet Countdown as a lead collaborator, contributing to their research on health and climate change. It is both a great honor and a significant achievement for UMT that its scholars' paper get published in the prestigious journal of the Lancet for the second time, through the 2021 report of the Lancet Countdown on the Health and Climate Change. I congratulate and thank Associate Professor Dr. Mason for his dedication to this great effort and outcome. These publications in the Lancet shows a strong commitment by UMT to work with the Lancet Countdown toward creating knowledge and disseminating it, which will hopefully lead to more effective strategies eventually. Strategies through which we should be able to integrate climate change mitigation into COVID-19 recovery, plans to address global inequities in health and build a sustainable future. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to have our guest speaker, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri IR Dr. Zaini Ujang, Secretary General, Ministry of Environment and Water, deliver his keynote speech in this event. Please allow me to introduce him. Datuk Seri IR Dr. Zaini Ujang is a national figure, having contributed as a public administrator, professional environmental engineer, academician, innovators, authors, and environmentalists in Malaysia. He became the youngest Vice-Chancellor in history of public universities in Malaysia when he was appointed as one at the age of 43. In August 2016, Datuk Seri moved on to become the Secretary General for the Ministry of Energy, Green Technology, and Water. He spearheaded a team to develop Malaysian Green Technology Master Plan 2017 to 2030. In short, his assignment is to lead the ministry to innovate and manage resources strategically to ensure availability, reliability, and affordability of energy and water services, and to advance the application of green technology to as well as promoting green economy and green living. In addition, he introduced new policies, particularly on new renewable energy and new business model for energy, In addition, he introduced new policies, particularly on renewable energy and new business model for energy security and future energy. Recently, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri just came back from COP26 in Glasgow, and we are delighted to invite him to share his talk and insight regarding the output with us today. Please welcome. Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Prof. Mazlan for giving the insightful remarks and also for sharing with us the active involvement by UMT in initiative on climate change adaptation, and food security, and to introduce our keynote speaker for this event. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Yang Berbahagia Datuk Seri Insinyur Dr. Zaini bin Ujang, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Environment and Water, Malaysia, to deliver his keynote speech. The floor is yours, Datuk Seri.
Dr. Ujang, I'm afraid we don't
You
have...
need to unmute your...
Yeah, please unmute yourself. Thank you so much. I'm afraid we still can't hear you. Not yet. Not yet. Ladies and gentlemen, in online hybrid events such as this one, such technical glitches are, I'm afraid, inevitable. We hope that...
That's kids.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
lovely.
It's so lovely to hear you. Thank you
Hello,
so much.
Datuk Seri. The floor is
Hello,
yours
hello.
now.
The floor
Thank
is
you.
yours, and I'm sure everybody is so keen on listening to your wonderful speech.
Thank you, Datuk Seri.
Honorable Datuk Seri Noraini Ahmad, Minister of Higher Education, Professor Mazlan, Vice Chancellor, Professor Alice Robinson, professors, community of scholars, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to share our engagement and experience we had by design for us to be there as a negotiator for the country. We were entrusted to 21 of us to be in the negotiation tables with many countries. And this is multilateral negotiation. The principle is very easy. It must be a consensus decision, not even a single country or single party country, they call it, disagree. So the whole thing will be null and void. So it's very important for us to understand the process. I'm not talking about what people are doing in Glasgow during that time for 2 weeks. There were 52,000 people attending various kind of activities. But those who are relevant to us to negotiate on Paris Agreement is about 20 per country. So you just imagine 185 countries attending. So I would like to share my experience as a head of negotiator for the country. So this is what we are here today, but I'm very interested to know that Lancet Countdown is to provide an independent assessment, which is very, very interesting for me because there are a lot of data, a lot of information, and we have to be very careful. Some of them are not relevant, some of them are too much, some of them are politically motivated, and this is something that we have to understand. As far as Lancet journal is concerned, a few months ago, they published a special volumes on planetary health. And this is very critical for us in Malaysia because we understand the whole picture of climate change in the context of planetary health. It has to do with health sciences as well as natural and physical sciences. In COP, or in what we call as Paris Agreement, and the governing body is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. It has a body called IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So they play a role to give us data, and they are not doing research. They are just compiling research, and it's about more than 400 of them are just working on it. And recently they published the latest data in August in a report called Assessment Report 6. So they have done quite a number of reports so far. So that guides us on understanding climate change. If you look into planetary health, climate change is one component. Yeah, there are other components. Climate change is still what we call within the certainty level. We can predict, we can stop it, we can do something about it. Compared to, say, for example, geochemical flows from activities, agricultural activities, fish farming and whatnot, that increase the concentration of nutrients, especially phosphorus and nitrogen in our water bodies, and biosphere integrity. Therefore, we have COVID-19 through this understanding. So let me explain a bit on planetary health, because this conference or this event is about climate and health. This is how we understand the whole thing. The underlying drivers are consumption, overconsumption. We consume unnecessarily sometimes. We buy things that we don't need. We buy food excessively. 40% of our foods that we plan to eat, we waste it. So this is not only Malaysia, but globally. Demographic shift from rural to urban setting. And technology, we use a lot of fossil fuels for many things, especially related to energy. And then the ecological drivers are climate change, global pollution, diversity loss, altered biochemical cycle, land use and land cover change, resource scarcity, as mentioned by Professor Alice Robinson just now. And the proximate causes are air quality, food production, infectious disease exposures, access to fresh water and natural hazards. And mediating factors are cultural and behavioral, technology, philanthropy, wealth, governance, and as a result, we have a lot of health effects. And this is also important to understand COVID-19 and dengue, say, for example. So as far as ministry is concerned, we have outlined our environmental sustainable framework for Malaysia 2020-2030. You can read them, you just write down environmental sustainability in Malaysia. But what I'm going to emphasize is this. We plan to collaboratively enhance the planetary health, which all of us depend on. It means that we are not talking about single framework or single thrust or single area such as atmosphere or hydrosphere or whatnot. We have to look into planetary perspective. That is very important, as what mentioned by Professor Robinson just now. So today I'm going to be very fast to revisit Paris Agreement 2015, and I would like to share what's going on in the negotiation process at COP and what are Malaysian objectives for the COPs. So in order to do that, I hope that you'll be able to understand what is UNFCCC, what is IPCC, what is COP presidency. As host countries at the moment, the COP president is the UK. Next will be Egypt, COP27. And we have also what we call nationally determined contribution and biennial update reports. These are two reports that a lot of studies depending on or based on. Yeah, nationally determined contribution is our ambition, our target by 2030, and biennial update report is the progress we made towards it. And we have to understand as well, as far as Paris Agreement, there are two groups. One is called Annex 1 countries, consists of 42 countries. These are countries considered as highly advanced and developed countries. And we have another one, non-Annex 1 countries. Malaysia is considered non-Annex 1, fall into the category of non-Annex 1 countries. And we are in the group of G77 plus China. And in the past, we were very active in like-minded developing countries. Then there are other groupings such as least developing nations, island states, and regional groups. So what is Paris Agreement all about? Number one is to understand the science. So this is through IPCC gave us the data, and from time to time they update us. Say for example, in August, assessment report number 6, it says that 1.1 degrees Celsius increase in temperature since the year 1900 is dedicated or based on anthropogenic causes. Anthropogenic means the cause because of human activities. Yeah, it's not natural. There are two ways to understand it, because when we inhale and the breathing process, the respiration process will generate CO2, carbon dioxide. That is not counted. What we counted under IPCC assessment report is purely anthropogenic or non-natural. And then we have to enhance resilience and adaptation to climate impact certain to occur. And number 3 is align financial flows in the world with these objectives. So the question is where the money coming from and what we are trying to do. So during the negotiation table, the negotiation process, we try to reduce greenhouse gases. It's not carbon, but greenhouse gases. I will talk about it later. And then we try to increase GHG offsetting capability, largely forests, tropical forests, peatlands, and whatnot. Yeah, we can also have carbon capture and storage, CCS. That is different. I think we are not working on that. Can you see my slides? Hello? Hello?
Prof, we don't see your slides. We are not seeing your slides anymore, but we have you and we can hear you. But you seem to have stopped sharing them.
Yep, Dato Sri.
I will share them again. Yeah.
No problem.
Is it okay?
Okay.
Yeah, it's back.
Yes, they're back live.
Okay. Okay.
Fantastic.
Increase the principle. You must understand common but differentiated responsibilities with respective capabilities. This is the principle of doing this. Yeah, many people forget about the principles. They just mention about what we need to do, but we must understand clearly under Paris Agreement, the principle is common but differentiated responsibility. Common in terms of to reduce greenhouse gases, to increase GHG offsetting, but differentiated different responsibilities. There are many ways to do it. Yeah. So Annex 1 countries should give funding, technology, and expertise. So in the debates in Glasgow, people were talking about, okay, we want to do this, so where the money coming from? What best you can help in order to do this? Say, for example, to phase out coal power plant, say, for example. So who's going to give funding for the new installation to take place? You cannot just stop people to do it, and they are from non-Annex 1 countries. They are very poor countries. And non-Annex 1 countries is to be supported by Annex 1. This is the principle. If people force you to understand the whole scenario of COP, and this is what we are discussing. Therefore, sometimes Saudi Arabia, sometimes China, sometimes India, sometimes Malaysia raise our voice to say that, hey, we can do it, but we have to go back to the principle. Yeah, and this is the principle. And therefore, we agreed to be part of the mechanism, part of Paris Agreement because of that principle. So let's see, this is greenhouse gases emission by sector. Energy produced more than 70%. In Malaysia, close to 80%. Yeah. Agriculture, forestry, and land use, 18%. So agriculture is very polluting as well from GHG point of view. Waste sector, producing methane in particular. Agriculture also producing a lot of methane. Industry, 5.2. You can see that. Yeah. The global progress is stalling because emissions are growing since the signing of Paris Agreement, and this is understandable because we agreed in 2015, and things are moving from time to time. We start working in 2016. The first large-scale solar projects in Malaysia was drafted in 2016, and we commissioned that in 2017. We just imagine it takes 3 years to take place to get it done. 2020, you just imagine, so it's a bit slow. Fossil fuel are expanding, yes. Coal is back and natural gas is booming, yeah, because of development in China, development in India, and green energy is slowing down. So people ask why. So this is something interesting for us to understand. As far as Malaysia is concerned, you can see that energy sector has reduced. When we send our biennial update report 3 in 2020, we are reporting 2016 or X minus 4. In 2018, we're reporting 2014. Yeah. So therefore, the data is 2016. You can see that in 2016, energy sector has reduced by 2 million tons CO2 equivalent. Industrial processes is increasing because we have a lot of industry coming to Malaysia. But what is important, land use and land use change and forestry has increased 14%. This is due to new developments, LRT, MRT, new highways in Sabah, in Sarawak, and whatnot. That created that situation. So what we can do is to maintain our LULUCF removal, which is 259 minus. It means that it is an offsetting value. If you look into this data, I can show you this data. The positive axis is the emission, the negative axis is the offsetting. The offsetting value is largely our forest and our peat soil. Yeah. So people are arguing, saying that this is too much because they want to force emission to be reduced. In order to get net zero, the red line should be 0. So it's like this. Yeah. Net zero means we have to reduce our net positive into net zero. Yeah. I think it is doable. We are not saying that we are not emitting at all. That is not the purpose of Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is to curb as well as you have offsetting values within your territory that will be acceptable. So that is the agreement. So that is net zero occurred in Malaysia in 2004, and prior to that is all net zero except in 1994. Yeah. So what can we do? There are 10 key solutions needed. Number one is phase out coal plants. So this is rejected by China and India and many other countries, not only China and India. Many countries are also trying to revert. Instead of phase out, it became phase down. Yeah, so that's very clear during the last minutes before the closing of the COP26. Invest in clean energy and efficiency, retrofit buildings, decarbonize cement and steel and plastic, shift to electric car, increase public transport, decarbonize aviation and shipping, reduce food loss and waste, which is 40% at the moment, eat more plants and less meat. So if you want to know exactly how much, if you can do this, you drop the car, going for public transport, it will reduce 2.4 ton year per capita. Yeah? In Malaysia, we can see later how much per capita we produce. Recycling is all little, except say for example, you go on take fewer flights, buy more efficient car, not necessarily electric car, more efficient car will do. Yeah, and then if you drive with 2 people in the car or 4 people in the car, will be as good as having an electric car. So this is the statement by Minister. The outcome of the COP26 for Malaysia. So I can specifically mention about this. Number one, we are very fortunate because the modality and framework under Paris Agreement has been finalized. So it means that Paris Rulebook has been completed. So we can now operate Paris Agreement based on the Paris Rulebook. People said that we agreed in 2015. Why now we are talking about the rulebook? Because it takes time. We have federal constitution in Malaysia in 1959 and 57, but now we still have new enactments, new laws, new enactments in state, new acts, say for example, because we want to operate in certain areas. Formal pelaporan, this is reporting because people are arguing on reporting. People say that your report is not right and whatnot. So we have what we call biennial transparency report. We must make sure that the report is correct, and not only correct, it must be reliable, and it must be vetted. Yeah, so there are procedures to do it. And this is also important. Next year, we are trying to finalize global goal on adaptation for Malaysia as well. This is under Article 7. And this is NDC updating. So what we do, we put our first NDC in 2016. And based on our promise, institutions like carbon action trackers and many others, including Lancet, they use that data. And they can make prediction. So recently, this year, before August this year, we were allowed to send our NDC updating. So we sent on 30th of July. So that report was utilized. So I can share with you what we have done this year. 2021 is a busy year for climate change in Malaysia. You can see that Climate Change Council, completion of Malaysian updated NDC to UNFCCC. This is on 30th of July, as I mentioned. National Low Carbon Cities, National Low Carbon Mobility Blueprint, development of carbon market mechanism. So this is in line with Article number 6 on Paris Rulebook. So allowing us to do it next year. Establishment of Greenhouse Gas Inventory Center, review of 2009 climate change policy, development of climate change legal framework, and the rest. So what is important as well is long-term low emission development strategy towards 2050. This will be completed next year. We have started. And then by next year, Bursa Malaysia, a stock exchange in Malaysia, will handle carbon market. This is the first stock exchange in the world to handle carbon market. In Singapore, they have a new entity. So this is what we are doing this period of time, and then this is enhancing what we are trying to do. So this is the minister's speech at UN Climate Change Conference. Updated NDC with 45% GHG reduction. In the past, we said only 35%, but this time around, we said 45%. Instead of 3 GHG, we are talking about 7 GHGs. Yeah. Minimum 50% forest cover at the moment in Malaysia, 55.6%. So this is far above our forest cover as required. And this is mandatory by Malaysian government, it's not by foreign countries. If we sign a declaration in Glasgow, they require only 30%. So we didn't sign because we don't want to give them an impression that we are going to reduce from 55.7 to 30%. Yeah, we still keep 30%. So you see that some of international pledges and whatnot are below than what we are doing in Malaysia. Zero waste to disposal landfill, carbon market, Q3 by 2022. And this is important by 2050, the earliest, for net zero GHG emission for Malaysia. People are pushing us very hard because they know that Malaysia can do it earlier. But we say that, okay, we go by our plan, the earliest for 2050. By 2030, all government fleets, including UMT, will be with no diesel and petrol. For next year, say for example, there will be a special tax incentive for those who are trying to or planning to buy electric cars. ESG policy for listed corporations. So this is, I think, very very ambitious from a perspective of non-Annex 1 countries altogether. This is our nationally determined contribution. As I mentioned, what I mentioned just now on GHG, expanding from carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide into hydrofluorocarbon, perfluorocarbon, sulfur hexafluoride, and nitrogen trifluoride. Unlike many countries, Malaysia is committed to economy-wide carbon intensity reduction. Some countries, they said reduction in energy sector. Some countries said reduction in energy and certain sectors. Yeah, so they are not taking economy-wide carbon intensity reduction overall. So it means that they have still pockets of 20% or 30% not covered under the NDC. Okay, I don't want to talk about that. Why CO2 is mentioned from time to time? It will call CO2 equivalent because CO2 was maintained at 1 as a basis. And you can see that methane is 72 times in terms of global warming potential, GWP compared within 20 years. Within 100 years. So whatever we discharge or we emit to the atmosphere, it will be there for many years. So this speaks the principle that we have. Those who have already developed in the past, they have burned more carbon, they have burned more fossil fuel than the rest. So their carbons are still in the sky at the moment that hitting the world or making the world warming. So the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities must be understood from that perspective. Nitrous oxide, 289 compared to CO2. If you look into chlorofluorocarbon, 11,000 more potent in terms of global warming potential, and it will be reducing, but some of them will be increasing. CF3, tetrafluoromethane, say for example, 5,200, and it will be double within 500 years. So this is what we are trying to reduce through this Paris Agreement. So basing on the NDC, prior to our meeting in Glasgow, this is data starting from August this year. If China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Ukraine, US maintain with their existing NDC, and the rest will follow them, the world will increase by 4 degrees Celsius by 2100. Yeah, 2100. If we follow the trajectory by China, Japan, Singapore, the world will be slightly lower. And countries like Morocco and few others, Malaysia submitted our NDC quite late, so it was not captured anywhere. But countries like Indonesia, they have done it much earlier than us. Yeah. Still, countries like Australia, Canada, EU, so the focus at that time is to force this Annex 1 country to reduce their emission so that the world can be lower than 2 degrees Celsius in warming temperature. So we must remember the emphasis is the big players. So this is what I mentioned earlier. First NDC and revised NDC is slightly lower. So what countries are now being asked to do is to further lowering it down to target net zero anytime after 2030. So it will be able to get 1.8 in the future. So this the quantum of GHG to be reduced from 452 to 26 as pledges from COP26 to 2030. So there's a lot more work to do. I have to make it short because I don't have much time. Okay, this data is very important. This is coal-fired power plants in operation. You can see that the highest is China, India, United States, Japan, and Malaysia is also there, but it's very minute contribution. You cannot see the diagram. And we are phasing out. it's not phasing down, but phasing out coal in the near future. Yeah, so that's for sure. Prime Minister in his speech recently saying that there will be no new coal-fired power plant to be constructed in Malaysia in the near future. So why, this is my last slide, why we mentioned about why Malaysia is still basing on fossil fuel? Because of the concept, what we call as base load. In countries like the United Kingdom, Sweden, Switzerland, and France, and many European countries, their base load are largely nuclear. So there is no fossil fuel use. If any, the fossil fuel use for intermittent demand or supply, and then peak they use renewable. Yeah, in many countries they do the same. In Malaysia, because our renewable is very unstable, we use largely solar. So solar sometimes is not, the sun is not appeared as we hoped. So we have less. And this is what we are trying to do. So I will stop there because many people ask, why don't we migrate from coal? We can migrate from coal provided we have stable non-fossil fuel base load. So the only thing that we have, either hydro, which is very limited in Malaysia, only in Sabah, Sarawak, or nuclear. So we have already abandoned our nuclear projects in Malaysia through MNPC, Malaysia Nuclear Promotion Corporation. I was director. I was the last director together with Tan Sri Rahma Bibi to close down MNPC in 2018. Yeah, so there is no nuclear in the future for Malaysia, in the near future in Malaysia, if any. Yeah, so with that, I thank UMT and the rest for giving me this opportunity to share what we have in mind and what we have discussed during COP as far as perspective from Malaysia is concerned. So I end my presentation here. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Yang Berbahagia, Dato Seri Dr. Zaini bin Ujang, for enlightening speech. It was so fascinating, given the fact that you just came back from COP26. Thank you so much for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a much demanded speaker and a strategic advisor to governments, NGOs, and corporates, helping them face the grand systems challenges of our time and understand their role in meeting them or dying gracefully if they need to. He helps organizations change the way they feel, think, invest, and operate in order to answer the intertwined question the future is asking us, including climate change and inequality. His two best-selling books, An Optimist Tour of the Future and the award-winning We Do Things Differently, map out some existing and proven solution to our current dilemmas. You should read the books, by the way. He's an advisor to Médecins Sans Frontières in UK, referred to in English as Doctors Without Borders, global ambassador for Client Earth, advisor of climate change and national security to the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense, among others. He also enjoys a successful side career as a comedy writer and songwriter, which he regards as essential for maintaining key skills needed in his strategy work. Notably, in 2009, he met the then president of the Maldives, Mr. Mohammed Nasheed, and was present at the world's first underwater cabinet meeting aimed at drawing attention to climate change. Getting exciting, right? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the one and only Mark Stevenson.
The floor is yours, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mason.
Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours. We would love to I'll watch you in action, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maysam. That's an incredible introduction. I'll try my best to live up to it. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on this lineup with so many distinguished public figures and scientists and health officials. So I'll try and do this as quickly as I can. My job, I guess, is to stretch the imagination of the possible for my clients, to help them try and imagine the future we might actually want to build, rather than reacting to the one that we have. So I'm trying to get them to hear the questions that the future is asking us and then answer those well in the way they invest and the way they form policy, the way they recruit, that kind of thing. I'm very much a fan of Abraham Lincoln's great maxim, which is the best way to predict the future is to create it. And of course, the COVID pandemic has occupied a lot of my time and everybody's time recently. But my message to governments and corporations and investors is that really COVID is a very easy training day for what's going to come next, unless we change the way we go about things. In the world I live in, we talk about the long emergency of the next 30 years as the old world we've built with all its assumptions about how we consume and how we run our supply chains or healthcare services or our governments, all that has to change essentially if we're to have any chance of passing on a decent future to our children. There's very, very uncertain times ahead. So COVID was really just a symptom of the bigger problems we have. And of course, the really big one, which we're talking about today, is climate change. And as I keep saying to government ministers, you can't self-isolate from climate change. That's not going away. So the good news is, if there is some good news from COVID, is that the whole world has been given a lesson, I guess, in my specialism, which is systems change and interconnectedness and interdependence. We're all now seeing the great wisdom of John Muir, the ecologist, who said, when we try to pick anything by itself, we find it's hitched to everything else in the universe. And the Lancet Countdown report, which is truly excellent, I have to say, and congratulations to Mason and his colleagues on that. It shows that very clearly, the interplay of climate and health and economics and policy and governance and food systems and supply chains and all that kind of stuff. Philip K. Dick, the science fiction author, said it rather well. He said, reality is that which, when you stop believing it, doesn't go away. And we've all been given a very big dose of reality. Johan Rockström, who many of you will know runs the Potsdam Research Center into Climate Impact, says, you may have noticed that the environment is starting to send back invoices. And those invoices include an increasing prevalence of zoonotic viruses crossing over because of our encroachment onto the natural world and the biodiversity crisis. In fact, I think it's now once every 4 months we're having a zoonotic virus crossover. Well, and the list we all know, HIV, Ebola, bird flu, swine flu, MERS, SARS, West Nile, Zika, COVID-19. The question is, what's next, and will it be worse? Unless we really start to take this seriously. I think this whole situation, this terrible situation we find ourselves in, is nicely summed up by a cartoon by a man called Tom Toro. It's a picture of 3 small children outside a burning post-apocalyptic city, and they're being addressed by a businessman in a suit who says, yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. And that just talks to the insanity of the world we've built. Gaylord Nelson, the great American senator, expressed it by saying, we have to remember that our economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment and not the other way around. And we've all learned, of course, in the last few years that our economies are wholly owned subsidiaries of our healthcare systems, not the other way around. So the translation here for every single one of us, whether we are government officials or business owners or working in healthcare or whatever, the translation is that any investment of our time or our money or our talent that doesn't consider human health and the environment is not an investment. It's simply theft. It's theft from our own children's future. As William Burroughs, the American author, once said, after one look at this planet, any visitor from outer space would say, I want to see the manager, because an alien looking at our planet would have to conclude that what we do as a species is turn environmental degradation into short-term profit for a very small number of the born lucky. So how do we get into this mess and how do we get out of it? Well, I think one of the reasons is explained by Peter Drucker, the business sort of philosopher, who said the problem is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. We can know this stuff, but if we keep building the same sorts of organizations with the same sorts of people in the same positions of power, asking the same sorts of questions and hiring the same sorts of people, then we'll end up where we are. But we have a solution to this, I'm always told, by these organizations, which is innovation, that we're going to innovate. The problem is that most organizations find it very hard to innovate because they've crushed diversity of thought out of their organizations. They think the management overhead of managing diverse people is too high. It is much easier to manage people who look and sound a bit like you, or went to the same school as you, than to manage a diverse crowd of people. This is problematic because diversity is where all the innovation is. The more diverse a group of people looking at a problem, the better the solution. But we crush diversity out of particularly our government departments and our large corporations because we think it's too expensive. So we need to change that, and then we might get to a proper definition of innovation. And my definition that I use is this, that innovation is the culture of asking the right question. And as a world, we have been asking the wrong questions and coming up with answers to them. In the healthcare space, for instance, drugs for obesity. It's the wrong answer to the wrong question. The question is, why are so many, particularly in the West, getting so out of shape? What is it about our economic policies and the way we organize, the way we work and society that's making us so ill in the first place? So we need to ask better questions as a society and use these as our guiding principles. Questions like, what's our maximum effect in reducing loneliness? Or, are we being good ancestors? Now is an excellent time to do this, of course. Because COVID has so destroyed so many of the assumptions under which we work, it is now possible to ask new questions and to find the impossible that previously we thought could never be achieved. The impossible is now possible in a way that it hasn't been for a long time because of what's happened. I know this from my own work, as was mentioned by Maysam. I'm an advisor to the Ministry of Defence, and we're currently working on an international peace and climate declaration for the world's military forces to cooperate on peace so that we may effectively battle climate as a planet. And that looks like it's going to be signed in March next year. One thing I do know about the impossible is it usually comes bottom up rather than top down. In both of my books, whether it's looking at open source drug discovery or renewable energy or urban farming or participatory politics, we found that it's usually people bottom up finding a way to innovate by being democratized by a new technology or a new way of thinking, a new financial instrument, a new way of communicating. They solved the problems because they had inherent in them the diversity required to solve the problem, but also they were very close to the problem. And bottom-up diversity wins because of that, because of the diversity of thought and because of the closeness to the problem. But there's also a more fundamental reason which ties into healthcare, I think, which is as you go up what I call the human trust ladder, things improve for everybody. So the way that we learn to collaborate first is we first meet and we tell our stories, and then when we trust each other a bit more, we share information, then we might start to share assets with each other. Then we might start to do projects with each other. And then we might, oh, I'm being interrupted by somebody. Hello, whoever you are. And then we get to the level where we start to want to change the rules or whatever. As you go up that ladder, you see increasing collaboration and increasing trust, but what you also see is increasing socialization, people feeling closer to each other. And actually the biggest indicator of whether we live long and healthy lives is not whether we quit smoking or give up drinking or all that kind of stuff. It's actually how socialized we are. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't quit smoking and give up drinking. There's also important things to do. But the biggest indicator of a long and healthy life is the quality of our personal relationships. So this bottom-up, diverse, collaborative way of doing things is not just the thing that works from an obvious academic perspective. It's actually essential to human health and happiness. And the problem with our world is that we tend to do it the other way around, and that everything's done top-down. Government ministers decide what we should be doing, and they then decide which projects can be funded. They then decide which assets can be released. They then decide which information should be shared, and finally sell it to the citizen or the consumer or the employee. And that never works because we're too atomized as individuals in this system we've built. Most public policies, assume that that kind of social cohesion has been too expensive. Most organizations are top-down and authoritarian. Most corporations treat us as consumers to be sold at rather than people to be engaged with. Most public services in most nations are very difficult to engage with as a citizen. You're kind of done too, rather than feeling part of the problem. when we do collaborate bottom up, we come up with amazing things. And indeed, the Lancet Countdown report itself is a very good example of people all over the world collaborating to create a wonderful event. And I have to say that's in marked contrast to a lot of healthcare, though. In many instances, healthcare is an example of one of those terrible hierarchies that does things downwards to people. Healthcare loves power and prestige, where the physician towers over the patient. So it's not enough for all of us to criticize just only how the world works and to write reports about it. We must also start to model the way we run our organizations, particularly in healthcare, to be more bottom up, to be more collaborative, to working closer with the people who are suffering from the conditions that we're trying to solve, rather than doing things to them. Because whatever organization that we represent, the way it works needs to build the new world. The future needs us to be different organizations. So reports are good, but how are we going to change the way we actually work day to day tomorrow? New systems, if you look at ecosystems theory, take hold because they adapt to change. And then they die because once they get to a position of power, they try to resist change. And now we're seeing a lot of that happening at the moment. I think it was Max Planck who said that science advances one funeral at a time. So if the organization that we're in is further encoding the assumptions and the prejudices of the old world, then really it's part of the problem. As Maysam says, we've really got to move from threat to opportunity. We have to see the long emergency that I talked about earlier as really the big opportunity. But that means all of us changing the way our organizations work, to be more collaborative, to be more diverse, to listen more, and to think about whether we're being good ancestors rather than the short-term KPIs that we're all so obsessed with. And you might be thinking, listening to this, well, I'm just one person in one organization, and that's all very well and good, but the power doesn't lie with me. And Alice Walker, the great American novelist, said this. She said, the most important way, or the most common way that people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. And as Gandhi said, what you do will be insignificant, but it's really important that you do it. Leonard Bernstein, the great musician, said to achieve great things, two things are needed: a plan and not quite enough time. Well, we have a plan, and that's United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and we certainly don't have enough time. But as the report says, this is an unprecedented opportunity to ensure a healthy future for all, and it's a pivotal moment. It is true that John Muir was right. When we pick at everything else in the universe, we do find it's hitched to everything else, which means, of course, that you, everybody on this call, and me, everybody we know, we are hitched to everything else in the universe, and what we do matters. It ripples out across time and space. So I'll finish with a quote from Jane Goodall, the great environmentalist. She said, well, what you do makes a difference, and we just have to decide what kind of difference it is that we want to make. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a great pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for the inspiring speech. We're very thankful to you for your commitment to be with us in this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, as stated in our Lancet Countdown 2021 report, warming to at least 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial time is now, unfortunately, inevitable. Announcement today would lead to a catastrophic 2.4 degrees Celsius of warming, and at the current rate, it would take 150 more years for the global energy system to fully decarbonize, putting everyone's health at risk, especially children. UMT Child Ambassador Program strives to make sure children's hopes and aspirations will be heard, and that they will have their say in policy making, the very policies which are bound to define their very future. Please join me to welcome on the stage Mr. Mogesh Sababati, a UMT alumni who is an active climate change advocate. Mogesh will share his insights with us and introduce the special performance by UMT Child Ambassadors. The stage is yours, Mogesh.
Thank you very much, Prof. Lam, Prof. Maysam. I remember just a few years back at this very place when I was still an undergraduate student, I learned that the rate of animal extinction has increased more than ever. And many studies show that this increase is driven almost exclusively by human impact. But listen up, everyone. Let me tell you all something. Looking at what is happening now gives me the impression that we are also on the verge of extinction. Because if we do not do anything about all the ambitious developments, greenhouse gas emissions and fossil fuel consumption, most likely there will be no tomorrow. And in fact, we've actually already been driving the roads to extinction. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mogesh Sababadi, a proud alumni of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu and an ocean activist. For decades, we've been having meetings after meetings, conferences and summits. But ironically also, we have been experiencing more and more extreme weathers, increase in global temperature, sea level rise, higher intensities of ocean acidification, loss of living species, spreading of diseases, and so much more, especially in the last decade. We've had way too many conversations than we should, pretending to care, yet nothing seemed to have changed. Our society has to stop debating. The world leaders should stop giving empty talks and promises and start taking action, start acting before it's too late, because in just less than 20 years, we're going to reach the point of no return. It's 2021, everyone. We have plenty of solutions to the problems you're facing. We just need to deploy them at the rate that the crisis demands. And we must also remember that change cannot happen without substantial political will, scientific research, and policy support. And remember, together with lots and lots of hope. Now more than ever, we need to start taking action, especially looking at how we're speeding towards the wrong direction as we see more and more impacts of climate change. It's either now or never. We all must agree that young people are the most vulnerable group to climate change. I believe education represents one of the most effective tools to combat the destructive potential of climate change, and as well cultivate an informed community. Therefore, young people, I believe, should be given access to climate education, adequate skills and sufficient resources, and be recognized as key stakeholders to stand shoulder to shoulder with the leaders to contribute to climate governance. Hence, quoting a famous song, I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Therefore, I'm honored to share this moment of joy to introduce to you the Children Ambassadors of Universiti Malaysia Terengganu. These preschool children of SK Institute Pendidikan Guru KDRI, SK Tok Jiring and PASTI will share their understanding of issues on climate change from the perspectives of marine creatures and will then end their sketch with their own pledges to combat climate change. Please give them a warm welcome, the Ocean Protectors.
Assalamualaikum, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Can you smell the smoke? And it's too hot too in here. Did you think climate change is really happening? And here's a fact that Chichu want to share with all of you. Do you know that right now, the greenhouse concentration at its highest in over 2 million years? Oh, well, Chichu wonder, how does our marine ecosystem survive in such condition? Let us see, what does our future generation has to say about this?
Parrotfish. This
It's not working.
that is. They always need good commitment in their life. Ha 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 ha. Guys, this is where we live. Look here, look at my rainbow colored skulls. I am a parrotfish. You know what we special? Do you know why you should protect us?
Our family members will tell you why.
This I have to script all girl on chorus. That is why chorus look so clean. We are fantastic. Do you know that we can do what some How do we do this? When we eat that chorus, we decide that as white food, the beautiful white sand. I am important to build coral ecosystem home to all marine animals. We protect the beach from the ocean. We are strong when we are together. We are the nesting ground for fishes. That is why you can eat so many fish. But look at my friends. They are not happy now. And sadly, it's climate change. My home is getting more unhealthy. There are so many gases on air, and water absorbs those bad gases.
Our home is getting warmer.
This is all your fault. You need to change it before it's too late.
Yes, this is your fault. You produce a lot of me. This is the major cause of climate change. You must stop burning fossil fuels. Use solar energy. Please stop cutting down the forests. We planted them, more of them. Do build more green buildings and save energy.
When the ocean gets more acidic, Marshall become bitter. Easily weak. Look at my baby sister. Her so small. Fish we eat smaller mollusks. Human get mollusks. This when there is no fish elsewhere, humans should catch me here in marine park, but we are protected here. People eat me and my family. No more parrotfish eat on corals, algae. Corals will be sick, corals die. Why human? Why? No more corals, no more home for all fish.
When the ocean gets warmer, I will turn white, bleach, and I will die. My other good friend don't like me anymore. I want to get nutrients from my plant. That is because of you, global warming.
As a member of the future generation, I promise to be more thoughtful. I want to protect these animals. I will save the ocean.
How? Tell us how.
My friends and I, we promise to do this.
I will say no to plastic straw. No, thank you. Turn off the water when I brush my teeth or shampoo my hair. Plant more trees to clean the air. Turn off the electrical items conserve energy. I use both sides of paper after the edge. I will finish my food. I will not waste it. I will replace plastic shopping bag with reusable ones. I live on sustainable reusable tumbler.
Thank you, dear ocean protectors. Now, what will you do? Will you join us to become ocean protectors? Yes.
Alhamdulillah, we are happy to hear this. Thank you all. By preventing pollution, we will slow down the effect of climate change.
Together we can, united we stand, divided we fall. Bersatu kita teguh, bercerai kita roboh.
Please do not blame me. I wish humans do not keep adding me more into your atmosphere. Let me be alone.
Bumi tanpa lautan akan kehausan. Pasti lambat laun hilang duniaku yang malang. Dewasa ini kita saling merayakan kejayaan yang akhirnya membinasakan. Apalah gunanya kematangan pikiran bila di jiwa kita masih lagi muda dan mentah kulihat hijau.
Oh, I know, tak boleh merasa mandi laut. Bersaing, main ramai-ramai. Alek ketua ni umur berjuta kita usaha. Jauh ke dari malat petaka. Ozon kening hari-hari kohoni kena makan asap. Oh, peace away pasal manusia. Serem benda-benda di dunia dok boleh tahan. Sampai bila-bila. Oh, I know, dok boleh merasa mandi laut. Bersaing, main ramai-ramai. Alek ketua ni umur berjuta kita usaha. Jauh ke dari malat petaka.
takut ozon lening hari-hari goni pikir makan asa oh pisawe pasal manusia selama benda-benda di dunia dok letah sampai bila-bila.
We are ocean protectors.
Ocean protectors.
Lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mogesh, and our beautiful sweethearts. Ladies and gentlemen, now we come to an end of our program for today. So we are so looking forward and so excited to see such good performance. We would like to express our deepest gratitude to all of you for staying with us until the end of the program.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget that people in every region of the world are increasingly seeing their health affected by climate change. And COVID-19 recovery presents an unprecedented opportunity to invest in a future of economic and environmental sustainability, improved health, and reduced inequities. A better future is still possible, and I think we got hope through watching the performance of our angels here, the UMT ambassadors, the ocean protectors, and we should hold hands together to make sure that a future is possible for these beautiful, beautiful angels. And now, by getting to the end of the program, you should know that many of our colleagues and friends have been putting too much effort over the last months to make this event possible. I would like to invite them to join me on the stage before we say goodbye to all of you. Please.
Can we invite
Yes, we would like to invite Professor Mazlan, the Vice Chancellor.
Prof. Zam,
Prof.
G,
Zamri, Prof. G, Prof. Ikhwan,
Prof.
please.
Ikhwan.
And from the crew, please join us on the stage, as many of you as possible.
Okay, I think that's good.
Lovely. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
being with
much.
us. Thank you so much. And we
And
hope
to see
you again in the future Lancet Countdown events. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. Thank you.